you no longer need to be next to a pharmacy.
Yeah.
You can cold chain it, get a nurse to pick it up at their address, actually treat them in their living room, which is much nicer for the patient. And that has the benefit of emptying the clinics.
Yeah.
And for oncology, which is growing at a terrifying rate,
Yeah.
that means you have to build less hospitals.
Welcome, Simon. Welcome to the Making It in Manufacturing podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
No, brilliant. Thank you for making the way to ARTO HQ in Canterbury today from Sevenoaks. I hope the drive was okay this morning with traffic.
It's always a pleasure to come down to Canterbury. I love it here.
Yeah, nice. No, well, to begin with, if you can give a quick introduction just to your name and your current role at the moment.
Sure. My name's Simon Adams. I'm currently doing an interim leadership role for a company called CDMOs, who are a compounding organisation, and they're based in Burton-on-Trent, up in the, I'm allowed to say Midlands or North, in Staffordshire.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, it's on the boundary.
As a most northern person you can probably get in England, I wouldn't say it's north. No, cool. We'll definitely dive into that in a little while. It's a topic I want to speak about. To start with, I ask every guest the same thing at the beginning. If you have 3 fun facts about yourself.
I guess 3 things that people probably don't know about me. I absolutely love art and sculpture. So you wouldn't really guess that because I'm quite enthusiastic about everything I do in my life. But when I'm out and about on holiday, if I can find a sculpture museum or an art museum, I'm a very happy little person. I also have a great love for classical music, which again, it probably isn't that cool, but it's kind of how I focus when I'm working from home.
Yeah, I would agree.
And the thing that most people do know about me is I'm mad keen on motorsports. So I live next to Brands Hatch, so I'm there pretty much every weekend watching whatever is racing. I love it.
Yeah. Who is your favourite artist in opera?
I love Puccini, and if I can go see Puccini outdoors somewhere in Italy in the summer, stunning. Then it just feels very, very special.
I seen Andrea Bocelli last year, Hyde Park.
Oh, he's a talent. He really is
phenomenal. It was a great experience. So again, maybe not cool for some, but it's the music's phenomenal.
I think there's something a bit special, getting dressed up, going to the Royal Albert Hall or a nice location. It makes you feel a little bit special, and that's before the music opens up. So.
No, for sure. No, interesting. And I suppose to begin with, we'll dive a bit into your background, career journey. So talk me through from the beginning. Where did it start? How did you get into it?
Completely by accident. I went through university and the plan was to get a degree, go into the Navy, be an officer, drive ships, have adventures, be like a modern hornblower. Unfortunately for me, the Cold War just finished at the wrong time, so there was no Navy to join. The ships didn't have any fuel and there were absolutely no adventures. So I came out, I spent about 4 years in the reserves, came out and had no clue what to do. I fell into industry. I ran a commercial laundry facility in Brixton, of all places, for a couple of years and started to get a sense that industry was a little bit like running a ship. It had an engine room, it had purposes, it had different elements of crew, and quite by chance I saw an advert for GSK in Hertfordshire and I applied for it. I had no clue what I was going for, and by, again, serendipity, the recruitment team spotted my request, and even though I think I'd applied for a site director role at the busy age of about 23, spookily didn't get that, but they came back and they said, look, we think you've got some talent, come and join us. And that was the beginning of my journey in pharmaceuticals, and I've just been learning and growing ever since.
And was the an area or reason why manufacturing and stuff that piqued your interest, or?
Yeah, I think for me, manufacturing is probably where I felt most comfortable in the beginning of my career. Again, it reminded me of a ship's crew. You had good hearty people who just tell it as it is. There's no politics. It's broken, it's not broken. Can you help, can you not help? And I found that very reassuring, and I think I felt I could connect with it. And then as I grew my career, I was then able to start to get comfortable with areas beyond manufacturing. I also love the engineering side. You know, that you go to a large packaging facility and it's moving faster than the eye can cope. And that's just, for me, there's a little bit of magic about that.
Do you think there's anything in the early years then from Navy, from what you were taught, from mindset or anything? Do you think attributes from back then helped progress things quickly early on, or get a grasp of it quickly?
The Navy taught us leadership. I mean, you know, as a junior officer in the Navy, it's all about leadership and confidence. And that whole sense of, I don't know the situation, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to win it. And the GSK I joined had been very, very scientifically backed. And they specifically wanted people like me because they needed to get more activity out of the organisation and not get lost in the science. You know, they wanted people who get things done, and that really suited me. That whole piece of being able to connect with the workforce and get the best out of them and enjoy the journey. That came with me from the onset.
And was the science part a struggle?
No. Bizarrely, I mean, I did my BSc in geology, so how on earth could that be helpful? Well, geology teaches you physics, biology and chemistry. And so I had a pretty good understanding of those three subjects. The engineering piece, I'd learned a lot in the Navy, so I felt quite confident there. And certainly going into pharma, in my experience, the chemistry tends to be relatively simple. It was a lot more challenging about 12 years later when I went into biopharma, you know, to go from having terms that I understood to terms that I had no idea about, like what is a vector? I remember hearing that for the first time and thinking, I need to go Google this. I don't know. But subsequently I found biopharm, I've really enjoyed the transition into biopharm. It feels more like the kind of thing that you'd see in a Hollywood film. You know, what we do to cells and how we make them successful is just fantastic.
No, nice. Leading on then to your most recent assignment, which is I think the hot topic in the UK at the moment, and some large projects going on to help improve businesses, aseptic compounding, something I never really knew much about until a couple of years ago. So I suppose, what is it, for anyone that doesn't know what this little niche is at the moment?
Well, I mean, if you think about making medicines, in large pharma, you're making them in batches of set doses. And the idea is that the different doses suit different people. When you get a little bit closer to the patient, even those different dose scales can be a little bit unsuitable. So particularly if you're dealing with something like an oncology process where the dosing is really sensitive in terms of if you want to give the maximum that the patient can take without overwhelming them, being able to tune that to the individual patient is really, really beneficial. This started at the bedside. A nurse would go along and dilute or add extra volume to a patient depending on their BMI. But of course that came with the risk that the medicine that we're making was going to get infected because it's in a dirty area. It's in a hospital surrounded by people being treated. So gradually it moved into the pharmacy, and pharmacists used to have like biosafety cabinets, simple downflow cabinets, spray and pray kind of technology. And then that slowly moved into the private sector. First businesses started up. And it's actually a very, very profitable venture. Because if you're making a batch, what you'll always find is that if you get a vial with, say, 10 ml in it, it will say 10 ml on the package. It will probably have 11 or 12 in the vial.
They have extra.
They have to have that overage. If you've got the ability to be able to pull that overage and pool it with other vials from the same batch, effectively you get a dose for free. So if you're being paid by the client, say, I don't know, the pass-through cost of the product plus a service charge, if you don't have to pay for the product because you can share a vial, that can be worth thousands per batch. So, particularly with monoclonal antibodies, oncology products, some of those are valued at, £5,000 to £10,000 per dose. So if you can manufacture without actually having to pay for that dose, it's a pure profit scenario. The industry has gone through quite a significant lurch in the last few years. As I said, it started with these open cabinets, the spray and pray kind of technology, as our dear friends in the MHRA say. And then Annex 1 came in. And Annex 1 said, no, you can't do that anymore. You need to have enclosed facilities. You need to have isolators. We don't want to see spraying. We want to see gassing. We want to see a 6-log reduction in any bioburden that might get on through the process. So it's really sterile. And that has led to a lot of investment. It's led to a lot of remediation, because some of these companies, they had to be told, frankly, by the MHRA, go do. And at the same time, this very English way of manufacturing has started to get the attention of people around the world. Because, of course, what this enables you to do is to treat patients at home. You no longer need to be next to a pharmacy.
Yeah.
You can cold chain it, get a nurse to pick it up at their address, actually treat them in their living room, which is much nicer for the patient. And that has the benefit of emptying the clinics. And for oncology, which is growing at a terrifying rate, that means you have to build less hospitals. So it's very popular in the UK.
Yeah, and is there any specific market leaders that are investing a lot on this trend? I know a lot of it comes from the NHS and a lot of the sort of foundations they have across the country, but is there any of the big boys involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two market drivers. There's the private medical healthcare and the NHS. And the NHS, of course, is split into the various regions. But probably the most famous recent acquisition within this area was Pharmaxo/Bath ASU being bought out by Icon. So Icon, an Australian organisation, and it looks very much from the outside as though they're gearing for further market acquisition, either in the UK or internationally. And it makes jolly good sense. I mean, I think Germany has now started doing compounding. I believe Belgium is quite close to it. And as with these things in Europe, they tend to go relatively viral. Once one health authority has figured it out, the others will follow. So I would see this as being a really great opportunity for market growth. If you can really get good at what you're doing in the UK, get to Annex 1 status, get the MHRA behind you, then it's a fantastic launch ground to build and to start a facility anywhere else in Europe. I think that would seem to make a lot of sense. There's also a lot of small players, so it would strike me that this is a good time for consolidation. And I've certainly picked up some vibes in that regard from the marketplace. I think you're right. There's money around. It's a hot topic.
And so why at the moment with remediation work, which you mentioned, why are these compounding units or businesses being sort of flagged and told to improve? What are the issues that they're facing that they need to transition?
Basically, they weren't really prepared for Annex 1. A lot of them are homegrown. So the difference between a compounding unit and, say, a normal pharma or biopharma facility is that they will have grown their own quality team in most cases. So you've got an MHRA inspector going in saying, I'm going to measure you to Annex 1. Often the facilities weren't up to Annex 1, they hadn't had enough investment. And when they started digging through the quality organisations, they were finding that the standard of quality investigation, the actual quality systems, weren't really up to what they were expecting. So the MHRA, they basically went on a bit of a purge. And over the course of a year, they pretty much went into every compounding unit and gave them a really tough time and said, enough, here is the bar, you've got 18 months to get there. And all the units have now, I think with one exception, made it out of remediation. They've done their investment. And we've seen a lot of people from pharma coming into compounding, particularly on the quality side, as that skill base has now been reinforced.
Is it from my little knowledge, I think, has it been a transition from GDP to GMP? Is it that been the natural transition that they've had to evolve?
That's a really great question, and absolutely, because a lot of these organisations started with GDP, and if you just look at the two guidelines, the green guide and the orange guide, the GDP guide is 1 inch thick, the orange guide is 2 inches thick. There's a story in that, and when you look at the requirements for a quality system, they're different in GDP to GMP. So I think it was quite easy for them to fall into that trap. And RP is not the same as a QP. There's a mountain of difference in terms of experience and capability. And the MHRA, I think, were very much saying, come on guys, put away the green guide, we need the orange guide, and specifically specials and Annex 1.
Yeah.
And they wanted us all to become, I say us, they wanted the industry to become as much of an expert as they were. And I think the industry has responded very, very well.
Yeah.
It probably took a little while to get some movement on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a shift in mindset, probably for the businesses as well. And not many people do like change, and they'll have had to change the way they're working and how they view their product and with it. But it's certainly for the benefit to the patient, and if it has a harmonisation across the industry, it's a positive. And for a business struggling with quality, compliance, etc. in that area, is there any advice you could give them in things that they should focus on specifically?
I think it varies from business to business. I'd start with the facility. Is it up to scratch?
Yeah.
Because you can do as much work as you want reducing CAPAs and deviations, but if your facility isn't up to scratch, then you're going to fail on the first 15 minutes of the inspection.
Yeah. And what do you specifically mean by that?
Is it Annex 1 compliant?
Yeah.
If it's not Annex 1 compliant, if it doesn't have a unidirectional flow, for example, in terms of how you get materials, people and waste through the facility, then you're going to have an awful lot of risk assessments and an awful lot of data backing up why it's compliant. Does it have isolators? Is it fully closed processing? So there's no danger of someone with gloves and an open box being able to work on these things. Those are the things the MHRA are looking for. Do you have a good validation for your facility, for your material flow? Do you really know your business? Now, if you've got all those in place, then you're in a great position.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great start. And then from there, it's about the maturity of the quality system. Bearing in mind, most of these compounding facilities started with these homegrown quality systems. A lot of them have had to go backwards in time and effectively almost refresh every document they've made to the new higher standards to make sure that it's a strong enough foundation from which to grow.
Yeah, no, good advice. And the future, what does the future look like in your opinion for aseptic compounding?
The NHS is very excited about this, and they're working to help the compounding houses. So they're starting to band the doses to make it easier for the compounding houses to manufacture. So the NHS are definitely in it. There's a lot of innovation with mobile treatment centres, compounding facility-owned clinics popping up around the country. So I think that home care piece is definitely growing. And the bit we're all waiting for is what happens when this hits Europe. Because that's where we could go for, frankly, explosive growth. If the European Union overnight decided that, we're going to do compounding, then that would drive a wave of swift investment. And the nice thing is it's actually not that expensive to set up a unit. To buy, build, fit is actually quite cheap. The validation piece will take a little bit of time and investment, but it's quite simple technology. So it's possible to mobilise relatively quickly.
Do you think there's a reason why the European Union wouldn't get on board with it? I mean, it sounds like there's only positives.
I think it's probably just that same approach to change as everybody else. They'd rather not if they don't have to. And I think it will be driven, particularly as we see the populations in Europe growing now really, really fast. It's going to put the same pressures on their health systems as it has on ours. And for that reason, I think they'll find themselves in the same spot of we don't actually have enough spaces in the clinic for all the oncology patients or the critical care patients. We're going to need to think about doing something differently. And the NHS by that point will have 10, 15 years of experience to say, well, actually, guys, this works.
I wanted to dive into your CDMO specific experience, something that you've worked a number of years in, hands-on leadership, M&A, and overall experience, I think would be really, really good to dive into. So to begin with, why is it different working in a CDMO environment to a pharma or a biotech? Is there a difference?
Of course. I mean, I know you're on LinkedIn as much as I am, and often on LinkedIn I see people describing a year in CDMOs as like 7 years in biopharm. Because things move so much faster. It's so much more there's so much more activity and, dare I say, actually enthusiasm as well. If you move from pharma to CDMO, which I did, it can be a bit of a shock to the system, because pharma tends to run at a very, very predictable pace.
Yeah.
Not necessarily slow, but it's predictable. Whereas CDMO, you're at the behest of numerous customers, all of whom have similar but contrasting goals, and all of whom are trying to win races against each other. And you're right smack bang in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So it's a very exciting place to be.
Yeah. And what are some of the challenges with being in the middle?
Probably one of the biggest ones is firstly matching their team. So making sure you've got enough resource to be able to man for man match their team. So have you got someone on the analytical side to do that tech transfer? Have you got someone on the manufacturing science and technology side to really get behind the technology and understand how to scale it to your facility? So that's the first piece. And the second piece, probably the bigger challenge, is normally my quality system versus your quality system.
I was going to ask that, how do you stay compliant with your own standards, but then a different system?
And of course, every client, it makes perfect business sense for them to have their quality system adopted by you. It's going to reduce cost, it's going to make their license applications much easier, and they can be a lot more confident, they understand the mechanics. And of course, if you do that for a client, then I guarantee you'll upset all your other clients. So having a strong enough quality system and quality team to defend it is absolutely crucial. Otherwise you can get into a situation, and I've seen this on a couple of occasions, where the client will say, you will change or you will lose this gigantic contract. And you're in a kind of a you're off balance, you have not enough time, not enough resource, you didn't put it in your business plan, and you've just got to get it done. And that's when the stress level can be absolutely gigantic.
It's massive,
and it's a big differentiator between the blue chip companies and CDMOs.
In terms of, if you are not a CDMO, you're at a biotech and you're using a CDMO, what challenges from that side come? What frustrations?
I think the frustrations can be that they don't have a huge amount of time. You've got to really make every meeting count. So that's the primary one. Secondarily, if they have a challenge, particularly recently, there's been shortages of capacity with the big CDMOs. So if for whatever reason you've got a challenge with a batch that's running through a CDMO and it fails, for whatever reason, you can end up at the back of a very long queue to remake that batch, and then your license submission, your marketing plan, your launch plan is all in deep trouble. So being confident of right first time with your molecule, and actually keeping with all of your project milestones beyond just the manufacturing can be very, very challenging. I think also there's a sense that you can put an army of people behind each molecule in big pharma. There won't be that backup in the CDMO space, and to a point you get what you pay for. There are some who literally say you're not going to get man-for-man marking because you're going to use our systems as a CDMO, and we'll give you a product of a certain titer, and you get what you're given. And also there's ones that will absolutely man-for-man mark you, but it'll be a lot more expensive. But they're then part of that development piece. So you can select different grades depending on where you are in the marketplace.
And is that what you look for then when selecting a CDMO? Is in you're understanding what your business needs are. You maybe look for a grading.
Absolutely. So you've got to understand the host company to begin with. The actual originator. What have they got? If it's a small startup, they're probably going to need a lot of help. So then investing in someone who has a encyclopedic knowledge of, assuming it's a biofarm CDMO, of cell design, all of those pieces necessary to actually bring a cell through that process is crucial. That's the flip. If you've got a big company, you don't want that innovation support. If you're someone like Novartis, you've got those armies of people. You're very confident of your science and technology. You just need to get on and make it at the CDMO. So it's about trying to match those needs and the right support with CDMOs. And one of the big things that you'd look for is, at the beginning, where are we going to be selling this molecule? Where are we going to be selling it? If it's EMA, then there's a huge range of CDMOs that are open. If it's FDA, then the list of potentials drops dramatically. Also, the cost increases very dramatically as well. And also, you'll be looking at things like do they actually have slots available for me to buy? Because they're under such high demand.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's quite a few moving pieces to try and get your arms around in order to select the right CDMO for the right client.
Yeah. And why, naturally, you think, why would Novartis need to use a CDMO, one of the biggest companies in the world in life science? So it's maybe not a case of why do they need to, but why do they use it? What are the benefits for them?
I think CDMOs in the last decade have done a fantastic job of investment.
Yeah.
If you look at the capacity of bioreactors in the CDMO workplace, it has gone up dramatically. Yeah. I remember Samsung building their massive facility in Korea on a scale that we'd never seen really before. Lonza continue to grow and grow and grow, particularly in Switzerland, as you probably remember. Yeah. And then we've seen this zero to hero behaviour from Wuxi. I remember when they first started in China and people were looking at them going, okay, where's this going to go? And then they started building facilities where the market wanted them to be, in Europe, in Ireland and whatnot. And I think they're now in the USA. And their growth has just been phenomenal. And I think that has reduced the pressure for the pharma companies to actually put a spade in the ground themselves and build a facility. Yeah. So I think the CDMOs have done a very good job of kind of prizing that capital investment demand away from the big farmers and saying, well, we can do it, and we can probably do it cheaper because we're practicing all the time. Take the Lonza, I think it's called the IBEX model, these units they're building. Yeah. It's exactly the same design from what I understand from building to building. So they paid all the development and research costs with the first one, and now with every one they build, they're reducing the cost and they're getting a better return on investment. Whereas if you're Novartis or whoever and you're building a facility, you might not have that standard design. Yeah. So you're going to end up with a lot of time and investment just figuring out how do we do what we want to do. Yeah. So I think CDMOs have done a fantastic job with that investment piece.
I spoke to somebody last week at the ISP conference. Gentleman came on the podcast. He said the average time for a site being built previously was around 4 years. Mm-hmm. They're now being shut up in 2 years in terms of the speed in which facilities can be pitched up.
Yeah, and the science has done a good job of supporting this. Yeah. I mean, when I first went into biologics, it was all about big tanks. Everyone wanted to build a 20,000 litre tank. Yeah. And it was because the product tighter, the grams per litre you were getting out of your out of what you're making in the bioreactor was very low. And the CDMOs have actually driven this science, the likes of Lonza, to show, well, actually we can get 8 grams per litre, we can get 10 grams per litre, 12, 15. There's all sorts of different technologies which have led to a log reduction in the scale of facility that needs to be built. Yeah. And of course, at the same time, we've got single-use facilities, single-use technologies, pre-built, prefabricated, and not just in the upstream, downstream, but now in the fill finish as well. So you can effectively, if you've got the money, you can go and buy, it's like a Lego set, and as long as you've got the foundations in place, you can have it mobilised and on the ground in 18 months, and then quickly validate it, crew it up, and you're away.
Yeah, there's some brilliant work with fill and finish production lines and things that are, I think Optima is a big one at the minute. That's they're literally just shoving it in, and within 6 months you've got it sort of installed, commissioned, etc., and you've got it through, and it's saving a lot of time with everything with it. OPEX, operational excellence, which is something the core of your I think heart and passion, I think, to get involved with. We'll discuss this topic. I think firstly, how crucial is it for a business to embed OPEX into their business if they want to maximise their success?
I think it's not something you can even negotiate. It has to be there. I often think OPEX is about accessing the creativity of your entire workforce. And if you're a business owner, why the hell wouldn't you do that? Yeah. And when you think about it, particularly in our regulated industry, there's a bell curve here. If you're in trouble with the regulators, or perhaps a little less experienced, you're probably going to be more on the side of tying everything down procedurally and everything going through a quality check. And of course, what that does is it gradually drains away the creativity of the organisation. There is another side as well. There's the other side of the bell curve. You've got perhaps too much OPEX and not enough quality oversight. That middle ground where you've got an engaged organisation who are compliant and both the quality and operations, or the quality and R&D teams, are constantly striving for ways to make things better, easier, even more fun. That's the sweet spot, and it takes quite a considerable investment in time, frankly, coaching, and an enormous amount of celebrations of success.
Yeah.
People like to be successful, and OPEX gives you that opportunity to say, you've tidied up the lab. It's been a mess for years. Thank you very much. Let's have a pizza.
Yeah.
And you'll find that everyone will come in and go, wow, thanks. And in our industry, you don't often get projects like that. They can often be multi-year projects, and you're kind of exhausted by the end.
Yeah.
Whereas in OPEX, you can do things quite quickly and quite effectively, and you get that motivational boost. So it's wonderful to see that just starting to disseminate through the workforce, and everyone getting a little bit excited about it.
I do see a lot of businesses though not take OPEX seriously. That they're not, they haven't got lean champions and little mini projects, and I do often think if you're sort of board level, you could get 10% extra from this just by focusing on it, I suppose. So it baffles me a little bit why each organisation aren't diving into it.
You often find in the drive to, take a biotech organisation, if you're building a CDMO, then you're probably going to be driving to get your FDA license. That's the big thing. If you win that, you're in a really sweet spot for getting business. To do that, you need to be super compliant, and it's probably not helpful from a intellectual perspective to have someone running around looking at ways of changing things. You want to do it absolutely repeatably, but of course you get there and immediately realise that your cost of goods is at a point that the client base don't even pick up the phone. So then you have to go back and re-engineer things to be operationally excellent and compliant. The smartest organisations are the one that do that from the outset. And you don't just have operational excellence for the finished facility, you have operational readiness as the facility is being handed over from the engineers, as you get people who, like myself, to come in and start saying, okay, what's the process flow? Is it easy to get that media from there to there, or is it going to walk 4 kilometres and take 2 trucks? If it is, then maybe we can do something about the design now, because that will pay back later.
And how do you implement OPEX in a manufacturing setting? And are there any core principles that you use for that?
Absolutely, I mean, it's this is a well written subject. For myself, it's about starting at the top. So I need to make sure that the board, the directors are behind it, and not just behind it in terms of, yes, carry on and do it, but I need them to be involved, because they've got to. In OPEX, there's a phrase, a shadow of the leader. People will walk in the shadow of the leader. So if they see the VP or the CTO walking the floor and spotting the changes, challenging the team, why are you having to work so hard there? Can we find a better way? They will follow that behaviour. Whereas if that group are completely separated and they're just watching via KPIs, it's much harder to get traction within the team, because they don't necessarily believe that there's any true faith behind it. So I want to get the senior people involved, and not just cutting ribbons and buying pizza, but actually get them involved in Kaizen events, get them down there working with the team and bringing those resources that they have access to help the teams, particularly when they're in difficult situations, to find solutions.
Is there challenges to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, this is an investment in senior time. It's often changes to people's goals and objectives. And one of the biggest challenges when you launch OPEX is you'll find that for example, the COO will have a cost reduction target, as will the CFO, but the CQO might not have any targets in that regard at all. So the quality team is being told, absolutely rightly, be super compliant, and you've got the rest of the business running around trying to save costs. And so when you start saying, can we sit down and work on doing a project, there's an element of, well, why? It's not in my interest. So it's really important, and I tend to use a process called Hoshin-Camry for this, to make sure that all parts of the organisation have got some responsibility to OPEX and will cross-departmentally support each other. Because if it's just one team on their own, they tend to run out of gas. Whereas if they can call in interesting people from different departments and different levels, then it's far more exciting and far more energised, and it will last.
I think there's the old saying of what's in it for me. I think you need to try and get people on board at that early stage of is it with him? I think it's the I heard it a couple of weeks ago in terms of analogy, and yeah, it's what's in it for me really, and getting them that shared vision of where you're going as a business unit is key at that early stage.
Yeah, and in some of the pharma companies, they've got so much infrastructure around them in terms of capital engineering teams, et cetera, that whenever you come up with an idea, there's a sense of it being lost to someone else who's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
And in my experience, most people actually like to see their idea through to fruition. They want that growth. They want to see how to go buy something, install something, validate something, write an SOP for something, and not for it to be just farmed out. Because it gives a lot of people a lot of what's in it for me, absolutely, but it's something they're very proud of.
Yeah.
And when I talk to some of my old colleagues from other facilities, we'll still talk with kind of slightly moistened eye about the piece of equipment that they designed and how it made a big difference, and they take it away as a career high.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing to be able to give to an organisation and to some of the people who would never imagine that they're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I think being allowed is the key thing. I remember reading something, that a Japanese company, and I forgot the name of it, and I think they're a big player in what they do, is their employees once per year had to present a project of something new and something that the business could improve on internally. So that was one of their KPIs that they had to hit, which I think's a brilliant idea in terms of getting people bought into how can we improve, how can we get better, have we thought around doing this instead of this. It gives everyone the opportunity to have an impact to a business, Absolutely. Which I think is quite unique, and that's one thing around Kaizen.
Absolutely,
that it sort of embodies that, I think.
From my perspective, the most successful companies I've seen with OPEX rollouts are the ones that don't just look at it in terms of the tools, 5S, Kaizen, Lean Six Sigma. They also look at the culture. And I saw this at one of our big suppliers, a tier 1 supplier, and they rolled out OPEX at the same time as customer service. And they used the Kaufman model for customer service and made everyone realise that they were all customers of each other. And then they used OPEX as a tool for improving that service. And it had a dramatic impact on the workforce because they really got it. It wasn't just about saving money. It was about a better relationship with someone that they're on the phone to every day. Being able to have the right kind of terminology to say, I think your service today was unbelievable or criminal. And for that to be a safe space and for them to know how to address that. I still look back on that as a best in class of cultural and operational excellence rollout. And often they're seen as two very, very different things, but in my experience they're not.
I was going to ask, what is I think mindset culture shift around OPEX? Is there any particular challenges that you have seen around that, and how do you overcome?
Probably the biggest one, particularly when working in relatively new organisations. You've got an organisation that's been designed and built by scientists and engineers and quality executives. You then introduce operations, and they're kind of seen as the poor relative. They have just as much creativity as anybody else, and often they'll see problems that nobody can see. Empowering those and getting the scientists and the engineers to let go and say, okay, these guys are going to run it. They've got some good ideas. Let's give them a bit of a tailwind and help them. That's quite a significant change of direction for a lot of organisations, and there's an element of kind of not wanting to give away the thing that you've cherished for years. But what you find then is they take it to a level you could never imagine, which is very much a fun thing to involve yourself in. So if you can get that engagement across the board and make it so that it's not the preserve of only the lucky few, then it's simple math. If you think of a brain as a computer, if you've got 500 people in the organisation and there are 50 making changes, you're only using 10% of the brain. If you can get 100% or even 80%, you're going to get such better results. And they'll love doing it because it's so much fun to do.
And what are some of the challenges post-launch of an OPEX project in terms of keeping the improvements there and people bought in? Is there a typical drop-off?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at any kind of major operational excellence program, year one, you're going to expect to see a 25% change in whatever you're going after, on time in full or cost of goods. Year two, you might get 20%, and it's that law of diminishing returns. Keeping the energy levels up as you get down towards the absolute maximum profitability we can make is 2% away from where we are. It's a different skill set to that initial, guys, come on, we can make a 40% improvement. And keeping the energy up is quite difficult. And a lot of organisations tend to kind of fall back at that point and say, okay, we are as good as we can be, we're done. And actually what you tend to find, if you look at the life cycle of technology, as they get towards the end where they have maximised everything, there's probably new technology coming in. So they need to learn to apply that to the next generation and to quality by design and so forth. So it comes in as lean and as effective as possible. And I've seen a number of organisations kind of take their foot off the gas and say, we are all that, we've got our trophies, and miss that actually the big challenge is just over the horizon.
Yeah, it's just you sort of almost there, really, and you can tip over. And do you use any specific methodologies yourself? Are you a big Kaizen, big lean? What do you do a bit of everything? Does it depend on the situation?
One of my early teachers in OPEX described people who do it as tool heads, because we all have a favourite tool. We're like engineers, you've got your favourite wrench. I've got some favourite tools, and I try and make sure that they're the tools that the regulators and most people can recognise. So, for example, 5 or 6S, the whole workplace organisation piece. A good regulator is looking for that when they walk into a facility. It shows them that the facility is looking after itself and not just getting a spruce up because the regulator's coming. So that's a good one to introduce, and it starts that whole piece of giving people the ownership of their own working environment, which is such a crucial piece. So I always tend to start with that. I love Kaizens, although they're quite hard to do in pharma because ultimately Kaizens are about very swift change. Now, as soon as you put in a regulated change control process, it kind of doesn't work. So you have to therefore have good quality people on board. You have to have planned it out so that any documentation you raise moves swiftly through the approval process. Otherwise, it can lose passion and lose energy. And the other one I think it's growing in popularity is Gemba. That whole walk the floor. I want to go see something. I want to go see how you pack a particular product. So I'm going to be there when that product goes on, and I want to see this whole process flow. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to encourage people to do things differently. I'll ask questions, and then at the end of the Gemba, I might have 4 or 5 things where I think we could do that better, or we've made it hard for the team, and I'm going to go do something about those. And then as soon as those actions are done, 2 weeks later or so, I'm going to come back, I'm going to check, and then I'm going to move my Gemba focus to the next process. And the great thing with Gemba, I was doing some last week, you get people from all different parts of the organisation involved, and even though they don't necessarily understand, they ask those really important questions. Why do you do it that way? And everybody in the room is thinking it, but nobody's saying it. So, I love a good Gemba.
No, I've never heard of that before. Such a new learning for me today.
It's hugely popular in the automotive sector. This started with the Japanese car manufacturers, and it wasn't about walking around with a clipboard. It was about trying to really understand the flow of the process. And to do that, you've got to invest the time and you've got to walk with it. If you imagine a production line with cars, you've got to walk a couple of 100 yards to see the full process flow, and you'll have an opinion by the time you get to the end.
Interesting. And how can a life science business use OPEX to prepare for inspections? Is that something that can be...
I'd say it's crucial. Because there's a temptation when you're preparing for inspections to get lost in the documentation. You're closing out as many CAPAs, deviations, change controls as you possibly can. Everyone's got their heads down. But actually, in my experience, inspectors, they make their opinion of a facility in the first 15 minutes of a walk round. So if the changing room, for example, is messy, dirty, not logical, if they can't easily understand how to get changed, they're already starting to form a negative opinion of you before they even walk into your brand shiny new facility. And I've seen that happen a couple of times where you've got facilities that have done massive regeneration projects but forgot the changing rooms. And the regulator turns up open-minded and they're grumpy before they get into your shiny facility. And you're then on the back foot, you're having to convince them that they were wrong. Because, it's like first impressions.
It's everything.
So having operational excellence in place to really look at it and make it so it's super logical and it's demonstrably owned, and there's a team that's passionate about it, that shines through to a regulator, and it really, I think it reassures them. I've had literal cases with some of the toughest regulators in the world where they've audited me, found a nasty spot and said, look, next time I come back I want that tidied up. You get a minor or a major for it, and when they've come back I've put 5S in or whatever, and they've walked into the area and you can see the glint in their eye. They're getting ready to give you a second. They know they've probably got you. They open the door and it's like, oh, actually, this is really good. And I've had it where they've turned to me and said, have you rolled out 5S? Yes, actually, we have. And they put their pen down and say, okay, take me to the next room.
The next bit,
And from an operations perspective, that's as good as it gets. They're not going to ask any questions. They can see how it works, and off they go. If you can do that with the whole facility, then the whole inspection becomes easier.
Certainly. Scaling manufacturing, I think they go hand in hand in terms to do so. But with scaling a site, you just had a product approved and OPEX is key for that. How important does cross-functional leadership and working between departments, when you're at that point of scaling, does it become so crucial?
It's absolutely vital, because what you often find is something that worked really well at lab scale. You start to scale it up and it's going to come up against the challenges of the facility design, the process design. And I've seen this where the most simple processes tie a whole facility in knots. So, for example, in a biotech facility, everyone's very focused on the upstream and downstream bit. That's crucial. But if you get the media and buffer preparation wrong, which are the feeds that go into the cells, or the chemicals that you use to purify after the upstream process, it will literally stop the process. It's the cheapest part of the process. It's the simplest part of the process. It probably, you could say, it's not so sexy as doing the studies of cells. But if you don't get that flow right, it will literally grind everything to a halt. And I saw that quite recently. And then you need to be able to take it back a step and say, okay, what can we do at smaller scale that can enable us to make this more efficient at large scale? And it's often about, looking at the process flow and saying, okay, why do we do that in manufacturing science and technology, the classic scale-up piece? Can we redo that experiment, but in a way that it would be easier for the guys further up? And as soon as you've got the data, go. And you can write the change control, you can bring that change into place. But if you don't have access to those guys, to that lab, then it can be a very lonely place. And then you're in the situation as an operations leader of going to the board and saying, I need more people. I need to put on another shift. I need another reactor. That's not necessarily the most comfortable place to be.
Leadership as a big topic in general, and I know you've managed sites, you've managed smaller teams, so you've got a wide range, I think, of experience to discuss this topic. Leadership style, and how has it evolved over the years from your Navy to now?
I think my style is very engaging. I don't like to sit in a corner office and wait for the numbers to come on my desk. I'm not like a traditional bank manager from the 1970s. I like to be out. I like to be talking to people daily, nice visual systems, and engaging with them. What are your problems today? Is anybody helping you? Because my opinion of leadership is we are not at the top of the pyramid. We're actually at the bottom. The most important people are the people adding value, making stuff. And if you're not supporting them, then ultimately you're planning to fail. So often when I go into organisations, it's about turning that pyramid round and teaching the directors, teaching the senior folks that no, you're an expense, and those guys are actually making the money. So if we're not spending as much time as we can helping them, we're kind of kidding ourselves. So I like to get them out on the shop floor. I like to get the voice of the shop floor heard as much as possible. And I think that's absolutely crucial. So that's, people will often say that my style is very much, almost in their face, because they might not be used to seeing a site director or a VP come and visit.
Yeah.
It's like something they do for the quarterly business review.
They come round.
Not in my case. I want to be down there every day. Yeah. And some of the best roles I've had have been ones where I've met the frontline managers. They've quickly figured this out and said, okay, stop doing the HR induction on day one. Come for a walk.
Yeah.
Those are the places where we're going to have some fun.
Yeah.
As soon as I can, I want to be working with the guys and helping them and bringing that experience that I've got to bear to make their lives easier and more successful.
Yeah. What do you think are the benefits of that style?
You quickly build relationships, and from the relationships, if you're doing them right, you can build trust. And often when I go into an organisation, that's been lost. They've had a tough time, they've had an upset regulator, they've lost a product. There's a reason that you're going in. Yeah. And often the guys on the front line are really browbeaten by that point. So you go in as magnificent new leader, and you've got your best tie on and all that, and you can see the look of real kind of doubt. Yeah. Who is this guy? Can I trust him with my career? And the sooner I can get my sleeves rolled up, if that means moving a mop round, I'll do that to show them I'm in it with you guys. Your success will drive board success, not the other way around. Yeah. And
how, as an interim, coming in as a firefighter type person to help save the day, I suppose, how does that impact their opinion, when you're in there? Because in my head, if he's not here for 6 months, it's they don't take it as serious maybe as they could. So
precisely, there's a lot of preconceptions that you've got to fight against. He's interim, he's being paid a fortune to be here. What's he done today? You're up against those kind of feelings before you even open your mouth. You'll probably find there's been some consultants in front of you who've kind of done the classic thing of writing out a prescription and saying, do those things and you'll see success. Yeah. That's not helpful. For me, it's about, I want to be shoulder to shoulder with them. If they're working till 2:00 in the morning, if I can, I'll be there with them. Even if it's just to take the garbage out, because they need to know they're supported. Yeah. And I need to understand why they need that support in order to make the changes that are necessary to improve things. But you definitely face a lot of preconceptions. And there's also a piece of, why bother making a relationship with this guy? He's only here for 6 months. If you can show that you're in it for them and that you're driven to see their success, not yours, they'll absolutely get behind you. And often you unlock this enthusiasm that the previous teams have never seen before. Yeah. And I love that, because then you start to see these rough diamonds who can be promoted, who are the succession plans of the future. As they build confidence, the organisation goes, I didn't know that guy could do that. Yeah. Fantastic. That gives me the power. That gives me the fuel to get through the darker nights.
Yeah, no, for sure. And was there anything pivotal, do you think, in your career, a moment or a mentor that's helped shape your opinion of how you want to lead and things?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to work with a training organisation, actually in the UK many years ago. It was very much, do you know what's happening in your facility? It was a question they kept asking, because we had all these layers of management and all KPIs and all that good stuff. But this guy would come in and say, okay, who needs your help today in the facility? Very uncomfortable question to answer if you don't happen to know. And then of course you get into the question of, well, why don't you know? And because you're not helping them, what's the impact on the business? Yeah. That really, really took me into a completely different space. Yeah. And it was really that launched me into that frontline focus. I want to be able to smell it, see it, feel it, touch it daily. If I'm not doing that, then I don't feel that I'm properly connected. Yeah. And I think that really, really helps as well.
What? Because there's a fine line there of being too much involved potentially, as well as you said, in their face. So how do you strike that balance of understanding when you maybe are doing it and when you're not?
Choose your battles wisely, and also you need to inspire the frontline managers, the middle managers, the senior managers. So they need to have a success. They need to know that they're doing the right thing. So again, it kind of, the OPEX stuff really helps, because it tends to bring those quick and early successes. And you can then use that to say, okay, that behaviour there is exactly what we need. Bring more of that.
Yeah.
And you start to get the behavioural change, and the metrics will follow very swiftly from there, because people get a taste for success, particularly if they've been beaten up for a few tough years or seasons. So as soon as they start to see the bright light of success, they want more, and that's a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah. And I always end on the same question of the podcast, is if you could go back to the start of your career, what's the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
This won't be a surprise after what we've just been talking about, but I would tell myself to make sure I have the least comfortable chair in my office, and get out and see. Really understand it, particularly the bits that you look at and you think, I have no clue how that works. Yeah. Go learn that, and that will propel you faster and more securely than anything else you can do from a leather-bound chair in a boardroom.
Yeah. Amazing. Thanks so much for your time. It was a pleasure to dive into the topics, and thank you so much.
Thank you.